What's up, everybody? Welcome to System Crafters Live. I'm David Wilson, and there's a screen. And we're back again with another Friday stream where we get together as a community and talk about whatever topic I've come up with for the week. And this week I'll be talking a lot about the System Crafters website, but I think it should be fairly interesting and maybe educational. So hopefully we'll see a little bit about that. Let me see if everything's going okay on the stream here. The bit rate seems super low. Okay, we're all good. Hello to Fikri. I'll see if other people join in just a second here in the chat. Arnaud. Alrighty. So over the past couple weeks, I've been working really hard on relaunching the System Crafters website. And this week I finally did it. We'll talk more about the sort of details about that. But in this stream, what we're going to do is talk about sort of the process. Not really the process, basically how I did it, because the System Crafters website has always been generated using org publish, but I wanted to make it a little bit more elaborate, so it took a bit more effort in the Emacs Lisp code. So we're going to walk through the code and take a look at how I did things, and then maybe we'll see if there's anything interesting to learn from that. Hello to Valentino, Eric, Ashraz, Yele, Rogerio. Nice to see you. Thank you all for being here. All right, so before we get into the main topic, let's talk about updates. So like I said, the new website is live. I had it under a subdomain for a while, but now it's like the actual website. So if you go there, you'll see this, which is the new design, which is basically reflective of the overall theme and, you know, logo and characteristics of the channel. So it looks a lot better than it used to. The previous design was not so great. It's similar. Looks kind of similar, but it's just a more polished version. And I try to make it a little bit more, well, I guess a little bit better organized so that it's easier to find what you want to find, especially on the homepage where it sort of walks you through sort of, you know, what things you might be interested in finding if you come to the site. Like if you want to get started with Emacs, it tells you to go look at the Absolute Beginner's Guide to Emacs, and then some more series that would be useful for someone who is learning about Emacs or customizing Emacs. And then on to Geeks, and then a link to the rest of the video series that I've produced so far, and just, you know, various other things that are relevant. So that's the main page. There's the guides, which are really just a list of the video series, but I'm going to talk to you in a little bit about what guides I'm planning to write pretty soon. There's also the new news page, which is useful in case you want to sort of follow on with whatever news is happening for the channel, for the website, for the community, etc. There's an RSS feed for this. If you go down to the bottom of the page, there's this RSS feeds link you can click on, and then it gives you the one link right now, which is the System Crafters News. You can see that RSS feed here. I'm thinking about doing some more for feeds for the live streams and maybe for video releases. I don't know if I should do that as one total feed or separate feeds in case people want to only subscribe to one or the other, but I think it might be nice to have feeds for videos and for streams just so that you have another way to see when those get announced. So let me know what you think about that. If you'd rather it just be in one main RSS feed, or if you think separate feeds would be useful for that. Jeff says announcements feed. Yeah, that could be useful. It's a little bit harder to put those together, I think, if I'm trying to aggregate announcements into one place. And we'll talk about maybe why that's the case in a little bit. There's also the community page where I've got sort of more of a central hub for the community aspect of the channel or the website. And information about how to come chat with us. We're on IRC and Matrix now. Obviously, there's still the Discord. There's going to be an announcement next week about what I plan to do about the Discord. So if you're on the Discord, I apologize that I haven't been there for a while to actually talk about what's going on. But I will go there this week and sort of let people know about the migration plan. And I'll also put something on the website about that this week as well. Then also information about the streams, and then community projects here, which is a place where I've sort of listed the key projects that we have that people can contribute to as part of the community. The main one being Crafted Emacs that Jeff here in the chat is the maintainer of. Also Dot Crafter, which is something I started as part of the Learning Emacs Lisp series, but I never really continued with it. But it does work, and it's pretty cool if people want to use that for managing their org babel tangled dot files. So another one to look into. And there's also the repos for the automated Geeks installer and live CD image producing GitHub Actions workflows that I created to generate images for Geeks that have all of the Linux drivers in them instead of just the free ones. So if anybody's interested in helping with those too, there's places to find information about that. And I see Ashraj giving a salute in the chat. I will also definitely be talking to the current moderators of the Discord, and we'll talk about that stuff a little bit before I talk to anyone else, I think. The link to the store, which I'm not really happy with the store. I just kind of set it up in a rush because I needed to get off Shopify, because Shopify is way too expensive. But it's a link to the store in case you want to get any System Crafters merch. I'm going to be redoing... well, let me be more clear about that. I'm going to make my own store website and hook it up to Stripe probably, or some other kind of payment platform, because I think that there's a better way to do that. And yeah, I'd rather do it myself. And then there's the How to Help page, which gives some information about how you can help the channel, like by spreading the word or by joining the community, either through the chat rooms, the projects, etc., or sort of like financial support for the channel. That sort of thing. And then there's other ways like the store and buying mastering Emacs, like I've been talking about for the last few months. So that's all that information there. At the bottom of the page, I have this thing for signing up for the System Crafters newsletter. There's a newsletter page that I've got kind of hidden in this block that you can go read to see about the newsletter. This is an alternative source of news for the website and for the channel. It's more of its own stream of content. It's not really like an RSS feed where it's announcements. It's like announcements plus news items from the wider community. Like if there's interesting things happening in the Emacs world or in the Geeks world or the overall Linux world, or just like things I learned that week that I want to share, stuff that isn't really enough to put into a video or an article like on a website. So it's another place for me to share information with all of you. So if you're interested in having an interesting way to do that, you should sign up for the mailing list. And that annoying pop-up is basically on every page, but I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem to be that annoying. If it's annoying, let me know. I'll try to see if I can add like a little X here that you can use to hide it. But that's the newsletter. Also, if you sign up for the newsletter after Thursday when I sent out the first issue, you can go to this page. I've got a link to that in the show notes right here, where you can read it online, basically. I provide it this way also in addition to the email format, just because I'm using a plain text format, and many email clients do not actually show you plain text emails in monospace text. And since I'm doing specific layout in monospace, I have another little page that you can use to read the issue in the format that's intended. And as you can see, it's got kind of like an ASCII design to it, which I find cool. I think it's pretty interesting. I hope people like it. If you do like it, let me know. If you don't like it, I'm also open to feedback on whether people think maybe it should be in like an org mode format or something else that would be easier for people to consume. But for now, this is the way we're going to do it. And I'm going to send out one of these every Thursday. So sign up on really any of the pages on the site. You'll see this form here, but sign up for the newsletter and you'll be receiving those. Like I said, it's slightly different than what's on the RSS feeds. The news feed is mainly for announcements, basically. Announcements about things happening on the site, videos and live streams potentially, things that are sort of relevant, so you can subscribe to that with an RSS feed reader, but the newsletter is different. So hopefully you are in on that. Fikri says 74 column. No, I think it's 80 column. That's the way that I had it set up in Emacs, at least when I wrote it. Hello to Darth Vader, Robert, and Thanos. Nice to see you, Thanos. And Case. Case says it's streaming time. Yeah, it's streaming time. That's right. So what else is here? Privacy policy. I mean, I use a tracking service. Tracking is the wrong word. Analytics service on the site called Plausible. I've got this written here just in case people are interested. Why is that cut off like that? That's weird. Anyway, basically what it says is the analytics I use doesn't actually track you on the internet. It's just, basic analytics. And if you want to see the analytics for the site, if you're curious about what's there, you can actually click this link and go look at the dashboard for the site. And you can see that there's a big bump in views after I've been promoting it heavily over the last couple of days on Mastodon. But yeah, no tracking of individual users, just like, sources of content, sources of views, what kind of devices, countries where their views are coming from, which pages people are going to primarily, that sort of thing. So what you see here is what I see when I'm logged in. So it just lets you know that there's nothing really scary about the information there. And there's also like a privacy data policy, GDPR kind of policy from Plausible, if you want to take a look at that too. So hopefully that's okay. Let's see. The other things are the RSS feeds link that I mentioned, Fediverse link for just going to my Fossidon page. So if you want to follow me there, that would be cool. And that's pretty much it for the site. I don't know why it's doing this right now. What's going on? Did it just not load the image correctly? That's new to me. Anyway. That's cool. So that's a new site. I'm pretty happy with it. I hope that you all like it. I hope it's useful for everyone. And the guide section is going to be much, much more useful in the very near future. So I hope you sign up for the newsletter or at least the RSS feed so that you can be notified when those things come online. What else do I want to say here? The last thing I want to say is that I'm also thinking, now that I've got a mailing list set up for the newsletter, I'm also thinking about doing like a private mailing list for patrons or sponsors at the $5 tier and above for like asking questions and getting help on specific things. I mean, obviously there's other places to do that. You can go to the Matrix or the IRC, but I can't follow what's going on in the chat channels all day long. I pop in every now and then, but at least with email, like I will definitely see all the questions being asked. So I'm thinking about providing this as a way for people to get help in a more tight-knit environment. So it will be a discussion list where anybody can send an email and respond, etc. And if you're interested in that, let me know. Also, make sure you're signed up for the $5 tier or higher on GitHub Sponsors or Patreon. You can go to this link for how to help/support my work to find out more about that. And I will also be sending out an announcement to current sponsors and patrons about that next week. And I should get it set up so that people can join that, and we'll just see how it goes. I think it'd be pretty fun. Interesting. Jeff says the logo looks truncated. So it wasn't like that before. I must have broken something this afternoon. Maybe it's a CSS bug or something. All right. So before we get into talking more about like the technical details of the website, I want to talk about sort of like the next phase of what I plan to do for System Crafters. So I'm saying that this is like what I consider to be the next phase of the quote unquote channel, because I kind of want this to transcend YouTube in the sense that like YouTube is great for making content that can show you how to do things. Like, I've made a lot of videos showing people how to do things with Emacs and Geeks, but videos are not the best way to disseminate tutorial information, especially in a realm like this where things are constantly changing. New packages get released all the time, or existing packages get changed, things break, or maybe there's new settings you need to add for certain things. So the videos will keep coming. I like making videos a lot, but I think that they can't be the source of truth for all the information that I'm trying to provide to all of you. So I'm going to focus a lot more on writing full written guides on the website, and then have videos that are built off of those, and they point back to the guides so that when things change over time, you will go to the guide and read the information there instead of trying to depend on a video that is wrong. I think this will make it easier for me to make videos because I won't have to explain everything in a video in super deep detail. I can sort of show how things work, but not really have to explain step by step how things work so that you can go to the guide and read that instead. So I think this will be a better balance and also result in better content overall. You get to see, 10 to 15 minute videos explaining something and then go read something in more depth if you really need to or if you want to. And then if you really want to go like end to end on a particular topic, like, you know, customizing Emacs, you can go read the guide end to end, and it will cover many, many, many things that you would want to know. So think about all the things I covered in the Emacs from Scratch series. You would have a guide that would go end to end on all of that, but way further than what I did before, giving you maybe options for what you could do with different packages, different workflows you could set up, and that sort of thing. So I think it's going to be much better to do it this way. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about the guides that I plan to write. I've got 5 that I intend to do, and they all have their own purpose, and they all interrelate, which I think is going to be pretty interesting because I won't have to go in depth on a particular thing in any guide. I can let the other guide that is more appropriate for that take that job. Okay, so first of all, a guide called Emacs for Everyone. And this would be intended to be a guide for complete Emacs beginners, from basic to intermediate computer literacy to advanced users like many of you. It might be challenging to make a guide like this, but I really would like to make it possible for non-programmers or non-deep computer users to actually learn how to use Emacs, because I do think it has value for everyone. So this would try to go from like really basic steps explaining what Emacs is, sort of what the mental model is for Emacs, how to use it, and then build up from there, showing how to use a lot of the inbox features. Maybe do like basic customization using the customization UI, but not really going into editing Emacs lists because I think that's probably too much. But, you know, a lot of things that you would want to know how to do, like maybe basic org mode use, a lot of the packages in Emacs like the calendar or the diary, you know, how to search for things, how to use the info and help systems, a lot of things like that. So just sort of the foundational information about how to use Emacs, you know, key bindings, those kinds of things. That would be a place where I would point an absolute beginner to get a full picture of what they needed to know to use Emacs. Then, for the people who have a foundation for Emacs, there would be the Craft a Modern Emacs Configuration from Scratch series, which is like the natural extension of the old Emacs from Scratch. And it's going to be a more in-depth remake of that series that gives you a full picture of how you can use both the inbox and community Emacs packages to build a highly efficient personal configuration. So if you want something like Spacemacs or Doom Emacs, but you want to do it yourself, this guide would basically show you how to do that. So we're not going to spend any time on Emacs basics in that guide. It would be intended for people who already have, you know, a good foundation. So, you know, the progression for a person would be first read Emacs for Everyone, then read this, and then you'll be able to customize Emacs from scratch. I'll also be giving a tutorial on Emacs Lisp, sort of like the one that I did before with the learning Emacs Lisp, but I'll take the things that I learned from that and then make a better tutorial that maybe will teach someone who is not necessarily a programmer, sort of the fundamentals of writing Emacs Lisp code and being very, very practical with it every step of the way so that someone could learn how to customize Emacs using Emacs Lisp without having to use a customization UI. The next one would be called Craft a Productive Life with Org Mode and Emacs. And this would be for intermediate to advanced users who want to leverage org mode more deeply to manage their tasks, projects, calendar, and personal knowledge base. Also, I forgot to mention like journaling there, which I think is pretty important, just writing for yourself. And instead of just being like a dry reference for org mode, we're going to actually build a personal productivity system from scratch using many of the org mode features. So the agenda, to-do items, like customization of to-do states, maybe properties on headings, properties on files, timers, clocking, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, basically build an end-to-end system for managing your projects and your personal knowledge, whatever else you have. And then when we finish that, what I want to do is build the same thing again, but do it with packages like denote or, that should be org roam. To see how those packages might actually help us do things more efficiently or maybe provide a better experience. I'm personally interested in sort of rebuilding things with denote because that's sort of what I'm doing in my personal configuration right now. But org roam also is very popular and it's a great package, so we will we'll cover that one as well. We'll probably well, we might cover building personal websites from your org files, but that might not really be in the scope of this. I might do like a shorter guide for doing websites with org, but when I released videos about making websites with org mode, people hadn't been super interested in that. And judging from the number of people who are on the stream right now, people still aren't very interested in that. So it might not be worth spending a lot of time on that, but we'll see. Maybe I'll do it if people are interested in that in the end. Let's see. Benoit says, it would be great for them to be packaged and available as text info so we can read them in Emacs. Yeah, I'll have a solution for that. Jeff says, interestingly, crafted Emacs is moving more towards a situation where outgrowing it leaves everything customizable through the easy customization facilities built into Emacs. That's interesting thought. Let's see. Alex says, I wonder if the non-coders would be inclined to want Emacs to behave like Windows applications with respect to shortcuts and key combos. Yes, Ashraz mentions KUA mode. That's a mode in Emacs. If you turn on KUA mode, that basically gives you like Control-C, Control-V, Control-X key bindings. I don't recommend people do that because Control-X and Control-C are critical key bindings for Emacs. So replacing those is not really a good idea, in my opinion. But I haven't used KUA mode in a long time, so I don't really know how they cope with that. Alex says, I've never used that, but I'd imagine they would want that. Yeah, that's a good point. I should probably try early to dissuade people from that thought process. Akila says, I'm interested. Yes, that's cool if you're interested in the website aspect. Ashprat says, I've been working on VS Code-like bindings, but to be honest, I got bored. Why would you do that? I don't remember the bindings for VS Code anyway, though, so. All right. Next on the Geeks side of things, craft your system with GNU Geeks. This basically would be a full guide version of what we had done so far in the video series about Geeks, but it would do a much better job of being comprehensive because all the videos that I made kind of like, you know, put some of the pieces together, but I kind of left people hanging after the installation video and didn't give the things that come after that, which are the most important. Like, how do you actually take your new Geek system that you installed and then add things to it or customize it to your liking? So a lot of effort will have to go here in describing things like, you know, how do you set up services, both in the system configuration or a home configuration? How do you write your own custom services? How do you find packages? How do you write package definitions? How do you deal with multiple channels? All things like that. Also, you know, even things like how do you host, how do you like create a server out of a Geeks configuration? How do you host it online somewhere? These kinds of things. So I want to go really in depth on a series about this because I think that while the Geeks manual or the reference guide for Geeks is good about like explaining a lot of aspects of Geeks, it doesn't really go from a like, here's what you should do next kind of thing. It does in some places, but I feel like there's a lot missing there. So I want to give a real sort of hands-on guide for how someone can get started using Geeks to bridge the gap, because it's difficult. If you've ever tried that, you definitely know that. Oh, and before we get into the full system configuration part of that guide, we would cover using Geeks as a package manager and a tool for development on other Linux distributions, because it's a good way to get started with it and to bootstrap your Geeks journey, and especially around like, you know, experimenting with creating system configurations, maybe running them in a VM, that kind of thing. And the last one would be the Crafter's Guide to Guile Scheme, or Crafter's Guide to Guile Scheme. I haven't really finalized what the name would be on that. But this is going to be targeted to Scheme beginners and hopefully even people who aren't familiar with programming, but I don't really know how possible that will be, because Scheme is a functional language and it relies a lot on recursion as a core primitive for, you know, a lot of algorithms and looping. So I would have to do a really good job of explaining that, I think, which I think I might be able to do, but we'll see. But we'll do that. We'll basically teach Scheme and then show how Guile Scheme can be used for many personal computing tasks outside the realm of Emacs. Now, you can script a lot of things and automate a lot of workflows with Emacs. You can call out the third-party APIs. You can do, you know, file management, system management, lots of things with Emacs. But I think that it has limitations, and Guile kind of picks up from there and can go way further. And you can even do application development, lots of other stuff like that. So I want to sort of show the progression of, you know, going from, you know, basic scripting with Guile to even programming applications with Guile. And more importantly, how the features of Guile and Scheme are used in Geeks so that you can understand how to actually write Geeks configurations, like not just copy and paste snippets of configuration, but really know how to write Scheme code. So that's going to be the important thing for that guide. So if you've always want to learn more about Scheme, then this will be the guide for you. So obviously that's a lot. That's a lot of guides. That's a lot of different information to write. I think it's going to be a multi-year effort, but I'm not going to wait until I finish writing them to release them. I'm actually going to be developing each of these guides in public piecemeal to start getting the ball rolling. I'm not going to write them start to finish. I'm going to pick certain sections that are the most interesting and impactful, at least in my opinion, and start writing those, getting feedback from all of you, and then continuing to add things, and then maybe just do scattershot, work on various different guides at the same time. Because what's going to happen is in one guide, I'll be writing some information, and then I'll be like, okay, I kind of need to explain how to do this in Emacs, so maybe I should write in the Emacs for Everyone guide something about this Emacs feature so that I can illuminate this concept and then have some cross-linking between these two guides to make the experience better. So that's sort of how it's going to go. I'm just going to be writing a whole bunch of stuff. Edge Crusher says, so in other words, Pratt's hut will be done before these guides? Probably. I would imagine it would have to be, because it's sort of a matter of necessity for him. It's not a matter of necessity for me to finish the guide. So yes, very likely that this will be done after his hut. Pretty interesting project for him, by the way. So, I will also be creating videos based on the content that I'm working on in the guides. It's a little bit risky because if I create content in the guides, make a video from it, and then rewrite the guides, then things get a little bit out of sync. But to me, I would rather treat the videos more as an ephemeral piece of content where it's not intended to stand the test of time. It's something that's there if people are really interested in the topic, but the guide is really the place that I want people to go to have the real concrete information. So videos will be created. I've got a lot of ideas for things I want to make videos on. I just need to get back into the process. It takes a while to sort of like get back into the momentum of making videos. So we'll see how that goes. But Akila says, in the last video of org website 1 year ago, yes, you mentioned that you will show how to style and add RSS. I thought today was that day. It will be that day. I'm going to show you what I'm doing. Eric says, I agree completely. Videos are for the moment. Text is archival and learn at your own pace. Yes, I want the videos to be educational, but more importantly, inspiring. Not really like, aspirational, but like inspire people to try what I'm showing and then give them the information they need to actually go do it. So videos will just be fun. It'll be just a way to create content about Emacs and Geeks, and then give it kind of the bigger picture that people can then go and learn more about on their own with the guides. The other important thing is that these guides are going to be free for everyone to read. I'm not going to try to put them behind a paywall or anything like that. It's all going to be on systemcrafters.net. Under that guide section, you'll see all of them. You'll have all the sort of the overview of them. I'm also going to do a thing on the site where I show which guides and which sections of the guides are under development. So you'll have a better awareness of like how complete any of the content is, so you don't really take it too seriously in terms of accurateness or extensiveness. I guess I don't know if there's the right words for that, but it will make it clear what is still under development, and it also will be calling for people to give feedback on the Codeberg repository or just directly by email, that sort of thing. But I'm also thinking about providing symbolic paid versions. When I say symbolic, I mean you don't have to buy the book to read it, but if you want to buy a copy that is in EPUB, PDF, .info, or some other format you would want to read on a device of some sort, or maybe built into Emacs, then you could do a pay what you want type thing for one of the guides for that purpose. That's just an idea I'm toying with, but in the end, all this information is going to be freely available to everyone. So that's the most important part. So if you want to support the development of these guides as I'm going through all this, you can go to the How to Help page in the Support My Work section, like I mentioned before, either through one-time donations or monthly support through being a sponsor or patron, that sort of thing. And I would definitely appreciate it because, all this is a lot of work, and I really want to spend more and more time on it and eventually like spend full time on it, like I mentioned a few months ago on a stream. So to get there, I need your help. So that's just a place where you can go to find out more about that. But regardless of what happens with the sort of financial aspect of things, I'm still going to do it because I find the idea kind of irresistible to do like real end-to-end like instruction on these things. So it's going to happen one way or the other. It's just a matter of how quickly it happens. Okay, finally. So what I want to do today is give you a walkthrough of the work that I did to make the new System Crafters website possible. And I should say, walking back for just a second, let me know what you think about all those guides. If you think there's different ways to split up the information, or if you like them or you don't like them, whatever, just leave a note in the comments or send me an email or find me on IRC or Matrix, etc. So let me know. Akila says, I've followed these live streams for over a year and I've never seen a BTC address. I should probably set up some kind of crypto thing, but I haven't done that. So I'll look into it. Oh, hey, Mark. Nice to see you. Fikri says, new System Crafter store written in Guile might be interesting. Definitely showing how I would do that or did that on a video series or an article or something might be cool for sure. I'm going to do that though. The new store will be written in Guile. Ashra says, I noticed that the repository at System Crafter's site doesn't have a license yet. That's to be decided. Yeah, I'm still deciding. I'm going to use Creative Commons for the content, but I'm trying to decide which one I want to use. So just trying to figure that out first. But the code for generating the site is all GPL3. And it says that in the publish file. And hello to Russell also. Okay, so right now, the whole website is generated with a single script called publish.el, which I'll open up in just a second, using org publish plus some extra stuff that I'll show you. Excuse me. Ashra says, just in case someone wants to contribute. Now, the contribution aspect is tricky because when someone contributes non-trivial amount of work to a project, regardless of the license that the project has, without some kind of copyright disclaimer, that person then owns a part of the copyright. So it's tricky because if I want to sell copies of a book, then if someone else contributes large portions of the work, then there's like, revenue sharing, all this kind of stuff. And I kind of want to avoid that problem because it's not because I don't want people to help, but because I don't want the headache of having to deal with it. So Russell says, regarding license for opinion, I'd use a non-derivative or for guides tutorial. Yeah, I'm thinking of like a, I don't know if I would go fully non-derivative, but I might go non-commercial. Gunn says, guides bound in GNU hide. That would be pretty interesting, I think. Restreambot, my God. Jeff says, will the show notes show up on the new site? They do show up on the new site. You mean for videos or for live streams? Because now, I don't have live streams up here in the header. I have them kind of hidden a little bit, which I should probably change. If you go to the System Crafters live link, then all of the old live streams. Now, this actually took a long time to fix all of the old live stream links or show notes. I had to go change a lot of stuff, add video embeds and all that stuff. Like for instance, if you go to Exploring Dbus with Emacs APIs, it's got the embed of the video and all of the other stuff in here. So anyway, all those are here. Even the one for today is here. So you can go look at the show notes for today. And a lot of the stuff that I'm saying right now is already in there. So you can go check that out. Anyway, yeah, I need to figure that out. Yele says GPL allows this without hassle. Does it? I think with GPL, doesn't all the contributors, all the contributors own the copyright for their contributions? And that's the reason why you have to do the copyright assignment to the FSF. One thing that the Linux kernel does is the developer, what's it called? Certificate of origin, which is like a thing that you include with your contributions, certifying that you created it and that you are handing over the copyright of the contribution, I think, or something that allows that. So that's a possible thing I could do, something like that. But at the same time, I'm also thinking about like making sure the guides are all sort of consistent with how I would want to explain things. So it's difficult. Gun says, cool, time zone calculator, no more confusion. Yeah, I keep making mistakes with that. So I put a link so that you can check out what the time is of the stream in your time zone. Now for me, it's obviously the current time because I'm in Athens, but for you, it should show you the right time. So go to this website if you want to see what time the stream is in your time zone. Now I'll never have to say it again. Benoit says, copyright and selling it is not related with GPL. You can take any GPL stuff and ask for money for it. Yes, you can. That's right. That's another issue. I don't really care so much about people making money off the content, but misrepresenting it or like not using proper attribution, things like that. I don't know how much it all matters. It's really weird trying to be a quote unquote content creator in this space and try to make a living on it because it's sort of like walking through a minefield. You want to have things be as open as possible, but then there's sort of like copyright and legal aspects you have to deal with for certain types of things. So I don't know. Oculus says, congrats for all the effort you put into the community. I really appreciate you sharing the knowledge. You made me interested in trying geeks. Great. Thank you so much. Benoit says, ethics is different than legal. Ashra says, copyright and licensing as a really tricky topic. So let's skip that one. Sorry for bringing it up. It's okay. I'm kind of like a copyright and licensing connoisseur, which sounds like a weird thing to say, but I'm very interested in licenses for open source stuff and for like Creative Commons. I've spent way too much time actually reading all of the licenses for everything to understand like what the terms are and what they apply to. I've spent way too much time looking at licenses, so I've thought a lot about these things. All right, so let's get back to the real thing here. So I've got a lot of things that I want to show you with how I actually generate this website. I'm not going to read these all to you. I'm just going to show you the thing in practice. So let's pull up the code. I will go to the publish.el file in this repository. This is about a 540 line file. There's quite a lot of stuff in here now. And I think I kind of want to start breaking it up into separate files because it has become more like a program than a simple script. So we might do that at the end of the stream if we have time, but we'll see. But the script is meant to be standalone. It should be able to run on a server that doesn't have any of these packages installed, just Emacs. So Emacs 28 at least, I think. So the way that I've set it up is that, and I've covered some of this in the previous series about creating a website with org mode. So forgive me if I'm repeating myself. I don't remember what I said in those videos. But basically, we just pull in the package system, and we set up a local package path. So if you look at the directory for this, you can see that, where is it? Oh, I haven't run it on this machine, so that's the reason why you don't see one here. But it sets up a local ELPA, package repo in the local folder so it doesn't pollute your actual Emacs configuration packages in case you are using Emacs on the same machine. We add Melpa and Melpa stable because we have some packages that need to come from those places. Initialize the package system, install use package. Then we pull in some of the built-in dependencies. Some of these things I'm using like VC get for like getting the commit hash for the current branch. Some other things that are useful. We pull in the ESXML package, which is a very cool package, which I'll talk about in a minute. I'm pulling it in from Melpa stable because the newer versions of it have broken things for the way that I write my website, specifically around how you insert HTML text snippets into your templates, which is important because org publish generates an HTML text string for the entire body of the content, and I have to plug this into a SXML expression, And if it doesn't allow you to use a raw string, then you have problems. And there was an issue with the System Crafter's website maybe, I don't know, 6 to 9 months ago, where when I committed the show notes for an episode, all of the HTML got literally printed out on the screen on the website and not actually rendered correctly. So anyway, I'm pinning this to Melpa Stable for that reason. I actually need to rewrite some of my code to use the latest version of ESXML because they did fix that problem, but it requires me to change how I'm doing things. But very cool package. I'll speak more about that in a little while. HTMLize. I'm actually using that here. HTMLize. Okay, maybe I'm using it. Maybe. But that's for syntax highlighting of code blocks. Web feeder, that's for RSS feeds. We'll talk about that in a minute because OX RSS is not so easy to use. Ashra says, why not use set Q, use package, always ensure T? I should probably do that. Yeah, I might do that actually. And then we get into more of the actual work of the site, but I'll come back to these things a little bit later because I think that it's better to explain them after we've talked about some of the other stuff. So let's go down to look at the publishing configuration. So if you've used org publish before, you know about this org publish project A list. And it's effectively a description of the publishing project that you want to actually execute org publish on. And I have a number of configurations here. One is for the main page. It's all the content under the content folder, which you can see right here, a bunch of org files here. I'm not looking at this folder recursively. In fact, let me just pull this up side by side. Do I have my key binding set up? No, I don't. Let's resize. There we go. That's much better. So everything under the content folder, which is the org files here, it's not going recursively. Then it ends up publishing it into a public folder, which is not here because I haven't run this yet on the system. And it's only looking for org files, uses this org HTML publish to HTML, which actually is defined in this file. I should probably name this something different so it's obvious that it's my own definition. But this is customizing how these pages get written out, and it's specifically about the file name that gets used for the output file. So one thing I do on the website is for sections like, let's say, guides, it's not guides.html, it's guides/index.html. I do that to have this sort of nicer looking URL scheme, which is not supported by default in org publish. You kind of have to hack it in, which implies that you have to do a lot of hacking around to make it work in various cases, and it's not perfect. I don't really recommend it if you don't want your site to look like that, but if you do really want your site to look like that, you can make it happen. It's just not, it's not nice. It's not a nice experience. If anybody knows a better way to do that, I'm certainly happy to hear it, but this is the way I've been doing it for a while now. More specifically, what's happening here is that there's a function called org export output file name. Is that right? If I require org publish. Oh, okay. I don't have org publish here. Is that right? OX publish. And then also maybe OX HTML. All right, so org export output file name. Okay, that's a function. And I'm basically like replacing it in this context. I don't know if I need the CLF for this, but I'm using it. But basically it is overriding the output file name function for files in org publish and changing it so that I'm making it write out article paths in the way that I want it to. I have a function that defines this. So that function is not super interesting, but that is the place to go if you want to find out how I'm changing everything up. The other useful thing here is I'm using this org publish org2 to use a different publishing backend called site HTML. And that's being defined right here. Org export defined derived backend. It's site HTML coming off HTML. And this is actually a super configurable part of the publishing backend system, where you can derive from a backend like HTML, but override the export logic for various different things, like the template for the page, how links get written out, how source blocks get written out, special blocks like the begin, end blocks. And and then headlines and other things. So I've customized some of that stuff, and I've also added an extra option here, which I'll show in a moment how that works, which is pretty interesting actually. But that's basically how the overall page gets generated. And if we go back down to the publishing configuration, you'll see that many of these publishing configurations use that same org HTML, published HTML for that. There's also a fact section, which actually, I don't have it listed up here, but it's sort of hidden in this part. I should probably like add those links as a sub menu somewhere, maybe down here. I don't know, but it's important. Oh, where is it? It's here. So fact, yeah. So I have fact pages for Emacs and Geeks. They don't have anything in them yet, but I intend to add things like that at some point, because like there's certain common questions or common problems people run into, and I want an easy way to link someone to that. So that would be the place where those go. So I have that for both Emacs and Geeks. So that's what this published part is for. Then there's assets, which is basically all of the CSS files, images, etc., that are necessary for rendering the site. This is something that I'm eventually going to move to a separate repository and have under a subdomain, because the way that I publish the site is I'm basically creating, I'm force pushing a new branch to the pages branch on the repository every time I make a change. And I imagine that that's not very good for Codeberg's space usage, because it's just like pushing new commits into the repository. In fact, System Crafters -site. I'm curious how big my repo is. 1.6 gigs. So yeah, I should probably like try to GC that. Hopefully they're doing it to get rid of old commits that don't have a ref pointing to them. Anyway, point being, this is how all those files get copied into the public folder. And that's from the assets folder. So if you go back up to the root of the repo and go to assets, you can see like CSS files, fonts. So I'm not pulling in fonts from external sources like Google Fonts, because if you pull in a Google font into your page, then Google gets tracking information from that. So I'm trying to avoid all unnecessary trackers in JavaScript and just use like actual files I've put in myself. So the only JavaScript that gets loaded on this page is that one file for the plausible analytics, which is not really tracking you. It doesn't use cookies or anything. So anyway, just wanted to point that out. All the fonts are actually files that are here. That's part of the reason why things are so big, because these files are not small. It's like 0.5 MB for every variation of the font. So it's a little bit overkill. It may just be that this whole folder, like, actually, let's see. Let's see. I've changed all my key bindings. I have to remember them. Okay, so in this folder, du-h, right? Does it not give me the whole readout? 178 megabytes? Okay, so I've definitely like used, wait, that can't be right. Come on now. Assets. 17 megabytes? Okay, yeah, that does sound right actually. So yeah, I'm eating way too much here. I wonder if there's like a button I can use to run GC. Benoit says you can just trim and keep what you need. I should do that, but I'm too lazy. I haven't done it yet. All right. Anyway, back to the publish file. Next thing is the live streams page. And this is where things start to get a little bit interesting. So in the previous iteration of the website, I had the listing of show notes for all the live streams, but I had to go update that by hand. And by about March of last year, I got bored of updating it by hand, so I just never did it. I always committed the show notes for streams, but I never linked back to them from that live streams page. And I wanted to find a way to generate that listing so that I don't have to go edit it by hand every time. So it turns out that Org Publish has a solution for this, and it's called Sitemap. But if you've been on the internet for a long time, like I have, your idea of what a sitemap is not exactly what this is. Sitemap typically is a page that lists effectively all of the pages on the site in a hierarchical form. At least that's the way it used to be, to show you the overall organization of the site and give you access to all of the possible links on the site. What this does is will look at all of the input files for this particular project, part of the project list, whatever, and it will run it through a function. You can have a custom function like I do here, like a sitemap format entry, and it will generate a new org file based on all of those entries. And then that file can then be turned into an output HTML file. So the sitemap part runs first, and then it generates that index.org file, which, let's see. Oh, I call it livestreams.org. And then the actual publishing system will take that and turn it into HTML. So the page we saw before for /live streams, this is generated from the sitemap feature of org publish, which is nice because it means I don't have to do that by hand, and you get a nice looking output here. You have total control over what this looks like in the end, because like I said before, you can have the sitemap format entry. Also, there's a sitemap style, which I don't think you need if you have your own format entry function, but you can just do that. And then sort files. So you kind of want it to sort based on date. If you want it to sort correctly, you need to give it a function, or actually this is probably a symbol, but you also need to have dates in the files. And the way that I do that is in my content live streams, let's say the one for today. Well, no, let's go for another one, like May 5th. You can see I have this date here. This is in what they call, what do they call that? An inactive timestamp. So if you run org timestamp inactive or org timestamp inactive, which is Control-C exclamation point by default, you can have it insert one for you. So if I say Control-C exclamation point, it will give me a calendar I can use to pick the date. I just press enter for today, and then it inserts that timestamp. So each file in this folder has a date field at the top with one of those timestamps in it for the date that the stream occurred, so that then whenever it generates that page, it knows what the date is and it can actually write that date out. Let's go back to publish.el. So if we were to look at that format live stream entry, you can see that what I'm doing is I'm using the format function to write out an org link to that file for the entry. The entry is basically the file path, the relative file path versus the project that you're using or that you've defined. And then org publish find title is a function that will export or extract the title from that entry, from that file basically, for the given project. So it will get the title of the page effectively. And then org format time string is used to format the string that's used here. So you can see that this format string here corresponds to what I'm doing right there. It's just the link to the page hyphen the date. Also, I think that list actually does matter here because I told it I want it to be a list and not a tree. Whenever it's a tree, it puts them as headings, and I didn't like the way that looked, so I went for the list instead. So it just basically makes them as bulleted list entries under that heading, the main heading. And that's it. That's basically how I write out the live streams page dynamically based on what org files are in this sort of folder of the project. Now, one thing that I haven't done yet, which I do need to do eventually, is insert some text here. I want to have like a description that comes in before I have the listing of all the live streams. I think the only way to do that is to control the overall page format, and there is another way to customize it. Let me see if I can find that, if I have it here. So if you go look at the documentation using Control-HV for org publish project A list, whoops, let me pull my screen back up there. Then it will tell you about all of these fields, I think. In fact, let's do this. So sitemap, if I search for sitemap, all right. So sitemap function, plugin function to use for generation of sitemap is called with two arguments, the title of the sitemap and the representation of the files involved. So there's a function called publish sitemap default that you can look at to find out like what it does by default. And apparently all it does is just writes out the title and then uses org list to org on the list that is passed in. So you can customize this to do whatever you want, including insert some text or anything else you want before that list. I haven't done that yet, but that's the next thing I'm basically going to try. So you just use this sitemap function, override that in your publishing configuration. The nice thing is you can do it on a per project level, so not all of the pages will be like that. So for live streams, I could insert some extra text if I wanted to, or even use an org include to include it from another org file somewhere else. So I don't have to like write it out in the code. I can actually have an org file that gets pulled in. So that's basically how the live streams page works, which if you've never used org publish before and you kind of wondered how, like if you wanted to make a blog or a site with a listing of articles, sitemap is the way that you would do that. Same thing for news. So news follows a very similar approach. I have the base content directory to be the folder for news files. It goes, the output is to the public/news folder, and this public folder is what I'm actually publishing in the end to go on the website. It uses the same publish function, uses its own format news entry function, format news entry, which we can look at. And the only difference is that I add the author of the file there, so that let's say maybe Jeff wants to write a post on the site about the latest on Crafted Emacs. Jeff could do that. He could contribute that to the site, and then his name would be on that post. So that's the reason why this is slightly different, because live streams, they don't need an author because it's the video, so you know it's me basically. But news posts could have different authors, and it just shows you how you can use the customizations on a per folder level to have different results for the different parts of your website. So you can definitely have a very custom website that has different outputs for the different subsections of your website. And nothing is really different about that. I'm actually using a sitemap function here. What am I doing? News sitemap. I didn't know I was doing that. And apparently, I'm not really doing anything special with it either. So I'm effectively rewriting what was already there in the default function. I think I did that for a reason, though. I just hadn't gotten back to it yet. So that will probably be expanded to have other things in it pretty soon. Hey, Kate. Kate says, eLisp looks a bit like Clojure. It can. I mean, it's a Lisp. Clojure's a Lisp. Okay, so let me go look at the chat because I've been ignoring the chat for a little while. Sorry about that. Ashra says, last copyright fun fact, you cannot transfer your copyright in some jurisdictions. Yeah, I know. It's also complex in that way. You can at most give non-exclusive, exhaustive, unlimited license to a party, but don't quote me, not a lawyer. Yes. Gunn says, what is SXML? A mix of SGML and XML? No, but yeah, I don't really want to have to deal with either of those. We'll talk about SXML in a minute. Parakovsky saw that I had a chat GPT on localhost. Yeah, there's a project called GPT for all. I think that's what it was called, or something like that. I was just trying it out on my computer, but I don't have it running right now. Let's see. Ashra says, do you want to use Codeberg's issues for those ideas, things like the index HTML stuff, or where do you want to keep a list of those nice to have things for the site? Yeah, the issues on the Codeberg page. So if anybody has feedback for the site or suggestions, this would be the first place to go because it will be a lot easier to track things. And I should say, like as an aside, Codeberg is my favorite alternative Git collaboration website right now. I'll tell you a bit more about that in a little bit, but it basically has everything that I need. I've been using it for a few different things recently, and it works extremely well. Nice UI, has a more familiar experience with issues and pull requests for people who want to contribute. Doesn't have mailing list built in, which is kind of a bummer. That's one of the things I liked about SourceHut. But aside from that, the only thing that I feel like is really missing about Codeberg, which is, I guess, a Forge Joe or Gitty thing, is that there's no search for searching inside of a repo. But aside from that, like, the experience is great, and I really enjoy using it. So I highly recommend signing up for an account on Codeberg. It's really easy to import repositories from GitHub or other places where you might have them. So you can do like a new migration. You can even migrate like a whole account all the repos and all the issues and pull requests. Well, maybe not pull requests, but issues at least. So easy to get started with. I highly recommend it. And if you have an account on Codeberg, then you can file issues on this repo and ask for changes or that sort of thing, or give your ideas. GTS says, what are you doing in Athens? I live here with my family. Ashra says, oh, I remember that one. My first contribution to the SC community. Yes, you did contribute that. That's right. And Parakovsky says, having a sunbath. What else? Yeah, not yet. It's not really been great for that. Let's see. What else am I missing? The live transcript marquee. What was that about? Ashra, excuse me. Ashra says, you're saying that now only about a single author on streams. What if you have a multi-person stream again? Well, I will, but I don't think it really means I should have multiple people's names on the listing page, but maybe on the actual page with the show notes for that stream. Kite says, is it similar to common lists? I've never coded an eLisp. Yes. Emacs Lisp is a Lisp that is inspired by the traditional Lisps, including common Lisp, but it has its own differences. And there's also a common Lisp compatibility mode with the CLlib package inside of Emacs, so you can have more of a common Lisp programming experience. Jeff says, I'd be happy to write something for crafting Emacs updates for the site. You should feel free to. However, I don't want to take away from your own blogging on your site. So whatever you want to do, if you want to put them on System Crafter's site in the future, or if you want to cross-post and put them on both sites, feel free. Just send a pull request on this site and let me know. Kate says, SXML is a great S expression to XML converter. Yes, it is. Let's see. Kite says, I'm using Codeberg for my classes, and it's really easy to use, and my students are really happy with it. Yeah, it's great. Thano says, why Codeberg over SourceHut? What would you change about either of them? Well, for Codeberg, definitely adding search, but maybe that's something that can be done easily. SourceHut, I feel like I really like SourceHut from a, kind of like changing the way things are done perspective, like focusing really heavily on collaboration via mailing list. But I think that it goes too far in the direction of like just throwing away everything that actually kind of helps. Like, for instance, having stars on a repo is something that, Drew DeVault has been very adamant against because he thinks it's just a vanity metric. But sometimes vanity metrics are important to show people that like a project actually has value. So I don't use Codeberg just because of stars. I'm just using that as an example of like sort of like the philosophy and how it can go a little bit too far. And SourceHut is a little bit too Spartan in that sense for me. And I want people to be able to come and contribute without having to, set up an email client or use Git patch or anything like that. So it's more of an accessibility issue as far as I'm concerned. And, like as far as capabilities, SourceHut has pages where you can do static page hosting. It has its own CI system, Git repositories, collaboration, wikis, all the stuff. Codeberg has all that same stuff too. So when it comes down to it, it's really just about what you value. And to me, I value a more friendly interface that an average person can come and file an issue, submit a pull request, and sort of understand what they're doing, understand what they're looking at. So that's the reason why I prefer Codeberg. Also, Codeberg, I like what they're doing. I think it's nice that they have like a nonprofit organization set up and they have funding to host this site. One possible downside of that is that it might end up being a little bit more unstable than other options just because, it's kind of like a volunteer run effort and community funded. So at any point it could go down and who knows how long it could go down. It might go down indefinitely for a number of days. So depending on it could be a bottleneck, which is why it might be better to also have alternative hosting places for your code. But in the short term, I don't really see an issue with that. I haven't had any trouble with Codeberg going down or having issues. I mean, it could be slow a little bit sometimes. But yeah, I don't know. It's good. Gunn says, when you go to the live streams page, the current stream should be represented by a live transcript as a marquee. Yeah, that might be cool. Okay, excuse me. So next, what else did I want to talk about? Let me check my list. Actually, let's just go down the project list. So we had news there. I also have the newsletter pages being generated from text files. One second. So like I've been talking about last few days, the System Crafters newsletter is kind of meant to be kind of a retro ode to 90s mailing lists and e-zines or magazines. You would often see these kinds of things by, put out by hacking groups. Like maybe you've heard of the legendary Frack magazine, which is about hacking and phone phreaking and that sort of thing. Also, the writings by Cult of the Dead Cow and many of the other big hacking groups at the time. They had these cool text files that got distributed on the internet, and they had their own specific format, and they was kind of like a magazine in a sense. They sort of told you like what things people had been learning recently. Michael says 2600. Yeah, I thought 2600 was one of those also, but then when I went back and looked at it, I think it was always like a print magazine, so that's why I didn't mention that one. If you want to see more examples of this, and Benoit brought this up in the chat earlier today, textfiles.com is a great place to go take a look at a lot of these. Okay, where is the listing? Where are the files? There we go. So a lot of stuff here. A lot of stuff here. You can go check out some of these things to get an idea of what my inspiration is for all that. But since I wanted to do the newsletter in plain text with specific formatting, like if you go to the site, you can actually find the newsletter content here. These things are leveraging plain text to have a layout. So I have things sort of lined up in the center. I have headings. I have, characters to use for the headings. I have indentation a little bit on some things. So this is all well and good. And if you get an email like this from this mailing list, this newsletter in Emacs, I think it will show it to you in plain text. However, if you use an email app on a phone, or if you use a modern web-based or even desktop email client, typically a plain text email will still be rendered with a variable pitch font, or a what's the other term for that? Non-monospace font. So all this nice work I'm doing to line things up gets wasted because it doesn't show up correctly. So I wanted a way to give another way to read the newsletter for people who have this problem, who have email clients that do not show plain text correctly. So what I did was I set up another section of the website to take those text files and publish an HTML page based on that. And the idea is that you would be able to load that up into a browser, like any web browser, or even EWW inside of Emacs. So for instance, if I go to this page here, copy the link, go to EWW, paste it in, then you can see the same thing here. You can read the newsletter inside of Emacs with the intended formatting. So I put a fair amount of effort in to make that possible because I wanted people to be able to read the newsletter in the form that I had written it. So I have a special function here for publishing these newsletter pages. All of them are text files, and there is a publishing function. So we got a different publishing function now. This is publish newsletter page. If I go to publish newsletter page, you can see that it's pretty much its own function from scratch. And I'm kind of extracting some information from the file name to get the issue number, and then I take the file name, which is the input file name, which in this case is like sc-news-001. And I convert that to an HTML file name. And then I use with temp file with that output file name that I created. And I just generate a page using my normal templating for the site with some tweaks to it. I remove the header and the footer basically. And then I write out the newsletter text in a pre-block, in HTML pre-block. And then I do a little bit of extra work to turn links in the text into URLs that can be clicked, because otherwise all these URLs will just be plain text and you're gonna have to copy and paste them to click them in a browser. So instead of doing that, I decided to make it easy for you by turning those into actual links in the text. So this is a fully custom publishing function for this specific case. Because I'm not doing any special processing on the layout, I'm just taking the actual text, doing some minimal tweaking to it, and then putting it into a web page. This function is actually pretty simple. So this is probably a good moment to go look at this DW generate page function that I have here. And this is where that ESXML comes into play. So DW generate page. So this is a CL defun. This is a common Lisp style defun. And I did it that way because I wanted to have keyword arguments for the function. So I have 3 required parameters: title, content, info. Content being the actual text content that goes into the body of the page, and info being basically an A list, I think, or a P list of org details for the file, which in the case of the newsletter is not used. It's just an empty list. But for actual org files, this does have stuff in it. The extra keys are for things like publish date, extra stuff to put into the head block of the HTML file, pre-content, excuse me, something that might go before the actual content of the page, and then Booleans for excluding the header and the footer. So then inside of this function, what it does is uses a big concat block to concatenate a comment at the top, which actually tells me what the commit hash is for the page. So if I go look at the text of this page, it tells me generated from commit hash E484AAE. If you go to the repo, you can see, where is it? E484AAE. So you can see the short hash of the commit that generated this page, which is kind of nice to have in case I need to go debug a problem with one of the pages. And formatting the times, you can tell when it was generated. And then I'm using SXML to XML, which comes from that ESXML library. And what this function does is it takes a list with a special format where you have this sort of nested HTML-like syntax in S expressions to represent effectively the HTML or XML content of the page. So a lot of this looks like normal HTML, just in S expression format. And for the SXML style of this, the way it works is that the first parameter to any node is a list starting with the what is this? The at? I don't know. In Greece, they call it the papaki. I don't know what the actual name for this is. But it's key value pairs after that for the attributes of the XML or HTML node. And then after this list, it is the child nodes. So it could be any number of child nodes. So here under HTML is head. You have all these meta tags for everything. You have some stuff for maybe like responsive pages, some alt links for RSS. Let's see. Style sheets for the fonts and the website. The script tag for the analytics script. And then also you can have back quotes or splices for, what do they call those? Anyway, you can evaluate expressions inside of this. So I'm basically saying when the head extra keyword parameter has something in it, then just insert it into the text or into the body here. Same thing for inside the body. I could say unless exclude header. So if I'm saying like if exclude header is true, don't put the header in. Otherwise, just call the site header function, which is basically more of the same. If you look for site header, this function just has more S expressions for like the navigation links at the top, the logo that's at the top, all the same. So I'm not using any external HTML file or templating system for templating the site. This is all just functions inside of the code that write out all of these nice S expressions that then get turned into, XML by this SXML to XML function. And if you didn't know, HTML basically is XML, at least with the newer HTML standards, which are probably since what, like the late 90s? Oh, quasi-quote, that's the one. Thanks, Fade. So anyway, point being, I, as a Lisp enthusiast, find this to be a better way to template my web page than using some other external templating system. because it gives me all of the power of a Lisp language to template the structure of the site and then insert things that are generated wherever needed. So it just works better for me. But having this all in the same file is a little bit noisy and distracting, so I probably will move it to other files at some point. But at least for now, I mean, it's fine to have it all in one place. There's a lot of whens and ifs in here to control whether things get displayed, like the publish date. Maybe I'll put a tag in for the date of the post if it has a date tag on it. Also, I could talk about this video ID thing. So for the live stream pages, when you see that there is a YouTube video embedded in the page, this actually comes from this little piece right here. So if let, and then in the let block, it sets video ID to whatever comes back from plist get info and the video keyword. That is coming from the org mode metadata for the given file. And the way that this video shows up is actually from this, is this an attribute? I can't remember the org syntax for this, or terminology. But I invented my own tag that goes at the top of each of these org files called video, and you just give it the YouTube video code, which is like the ID for the video that you normally see in the URL for a video on YouTube. You just put it there, and then that then gets interpreted by this section of the backend. So this options A list allows you to say, oh, I want this video attribute of the file to get turned into an info keyword called video. And there's some extra logic here that you can put in for processing those values, or maybe merging together multiple values with the same name in a single file. Maybe it's called a property, desync-r, I don't know. So you can add whatever you want for this. You can have any number of custom things for this. And if you've ever used like the LaTeX export backend, you've probably seen a bunch of these extra options at the top of files because it needs a lot of extra configuration help. So that's why this options A list exists. So all that goes back to this part in my template where if there is a property called video in the information for this org page, then I will use the DW embed video function to embed that into the page right after the title of the page effectively. So title, then the date of the page, and then the embed for the video. So that's not all. Embed video has to do a little bit of extra stuff here. What it does is formats the string, the YouTube iframe format, and it takes the video ID and just puts in raw HTML to put in a div and an iframe. The way that YouTube basically tells you to embed a video in the site, this is effectively the same code. So it puts an iframe in, points it to that YouTube embed page with the video ID specified, and then that's now part of the page. So that's how you can do that. There's another way that I actually have to embed a video in a page. Did I take that out, or is it still here? Org YT. If I deleted that, oh, here it is. So there's another way that I've actually got to embed a video in the page, and this is the way that I used to do it. You can set your own custom org link format. So if you use Control-C, is that right? In an org file, you can use Control-C, Control-L to insert a link. Now, if you have a completion system like Vertigo, etc., you'll see there's a bunch of suggestions for the different link types. And there's a lot of stuff in here you probably didn't expect to see, like denote, elisp, etc. These are all, some are like inbox supported, like HTTP file, etc. But some are from extensions to org mode. And I'm basically adding my own in here called YT for YouTube. So when you add this into your configuration, now in any page, you can say, I want a link of YT colon something. And then these two functions for follow and export will then cause that thing to be embedded into the output of the page. So there's export, which I'm just basically calling DW embed video, the function we saw before. And then there's also this follow, which means that if you are reading the org file in a buffer and you use, org follow, org link, org link. Org open link. I don't know what the function is for that. Is it Control C, Control O, Control H, K, Control C, Control O? Org open at point. Okay, so that open at point function ultimately will call this. And here I'm basically say call browse URL, which is something that will open the user's desktop browser and go to the YouTube page. But this is not something that a user of the website would actually see. This is something that's just for me, for my own editing. Anyway, that's how I get org or embedding of YouTube videos into my org pages, especially as part of the template for my website. So that makes it a lot easier for me. I don't have to go do anything special every time I want to set up a video show notes page or a stream page. I just have this video thing at the top with the code for the video, and then it gets put in automatically. So that's super useful. Let me see what I'm missing in the chat. Case says SXML to XML is included in Emacs. No, that is in a package called ESXML. Kate says SXML is the best thing in life. My website is done with SXML2, but with Chibi Scheme. That's cool. I didn't know that Chibi had stuff for that. I know that Guile Scheme has SXML built in, so you can pretty easily use that for templating sites. And when I start writing, or when I continue writing the new store/patronage site for System Crafters, I'm going to be using SXML. I can't say that. And if I say it in a quick way, it's going to sound like a word that YouTube doesn't like. So let's just call it SXML very slowly and carefully. Anyway, I'll be using that in my Guile website. So it's cool to have that built in. Grant Centauri says, I wish I would have had known about this. I did my HTML templating as a giant format string. Yeah, this is better than using a big format string. That's for sure. Dave's here. Hey, Dave. Dave says, quasi-quote, the ultimate template language. I agree, 100%. I mean, I think that's one of the big pluses of Lisp languages is that you have a perfect templating language for data structures built right into the language, and it's pretty awesome. Gunn says, quasi-quote, in Land of Lisp is called the flip-flop operator. Okay. Well, I could see why you would say that, but I don't know. Theo Peckley says, is this on VCS? Yes, if you go to Codeberg, you can see codeberg.org/systemcrafters/systemcrafters-site, and the publish.el is there. You can go take a look at all the same stuff we're looking at right now. Exactly, Kates. That's the word I was thinking of, and I'm not saying it. Kay says, I found out that Scheme has monadic formatters. Yes, there's a SRFI, SRFI for that. Pure Functor says, pretty cool topic. I wrote a derived export backend for my site as well. I think it's pretty cool, actually, to write a custom export backend. I think more people should do it because it gives you quite a lot of control. Kate says, the author of Chibi Scheme, Alex Shin. Yes, that's Alex Shin. Did many of those combinator formatters and stuff. Yeah, Alex Shin is a very prominent person in the Scheme community, has done a lot of stuff. I think, aside from, I think he was probably on one of the review boards for R7RS at least, maybe R6RS. Also, I think Alex Shin Snow came up with the Snow package manager for Scheme. There's a few different competing standards for having like a package manager for Scheme. Obviously, Geeks is one of those. But yeah, there's this concept of Snow packages, snowfort.org. I think Alex Shin came up with that. So yeah, Alex Shin has done a lot of stuff in the Scheme community. Let's see, what else? Kay says, I like Chibi, I just wish it would do compilation in native binaries. Well, see, the thing is that's your job. You pull in Chibi Scheme into your C program and statically compile it, and then you have a compiled binary for your Scheme program. But actually, I'm being a little bit facetious. Obviously, if you want the Scheme code itself to be compiled to native, then you can't do that. Use Gambit Scheme if you want that. Gambit Scheme is a little bit weird, though. I've written a lot of code with Gambit Scheme. I've even contributed to their project a little bit, but I don't know. I went back to it recently because I wanted that ability to compile Scheme files directly to native code, and it was just a little bit weird. Case says, or chicken. Yeah, like I've mentioned before on streams, I I don't know. I have a thing against something called chicken scheme. It just sounds really weird. Even though I know chicken scheme is great. It's a great implementation. Has, the whole eggs thing for packages that you can pull in. It's got quite a lot of stuff in there. For me, kind of just like, I can't take it seriously. I don't want to go telling people I'm writing chicken scheme apps. That's my personal problem. Hello to Alexander. Let's see. Kay says, if you just wanted to do a stream or video on getting Snow to work, that'd be cool. Yeah, I might try that someday. Oh, yeah. Akite says, there was an optimizer compiler called Stalin, too. Yeah, Stalin was pretty cool. But no, Stalin, the scheme implementation, is pretty cool. Not the person, okay? Let's get that right. Kay says, I want to hear David badmouth scheme implementations. I've looked at many of them, or at least the ones that were relevant to the projects that I do. I have opinions. Fade says, if I absolutely had to be scheme, I would pick Racket. Well, Racket is cool. Racket is very batteries included. But the thing I don't like about Racket is that because they put so much of a focus on the fact that you can write your own languages using their like weird lang directive, and you can write any kind of language you want with it. To me, that makes it less focused on being a really, really good scheme like I want it to be. It's built on Shea scheme, which is a super, super, super high quality scheme implementation. And Racket itself provides you with the Reiko command line tool, which you can actually use to produce standalone binaries from your Racket applications, which is awesome. But I just feel like Racket may be a little bit too bloated for me and a lot of too much extra stuff. So I've looked into it quite a lot. I think it's really, really nice, but I don't want to use it personally. Let's see. Shea is cool, but Shea is hard to figure out how to use to build standalone applications. But as a scheme implementation, if all you want to do is load scheme code into it and run it, it's definitely one of the fastest, if not fastest, scheme implementation. And it has kind of like the best internal implementation of a scheme ever, because Kent Dybvig, I don't know how you pronounce his last name, wrote it. And if you've looked into scheme research papers, Kent Dybvig has written all the most excellent papers on scheme out there, like seriously top-notch stuff. Obviously, he was a professor of computer science and specialized in schemes, so he knows a lot, I mean, especially about compilers and whatnot. So Shea is super cool. Though I wasn't able to use it for my projects. Also worth mentioning, Racket in more recent years is now based on Shea. So you're basically using Shea scheme whenever you're using Racket. Akite says, Shea is weird. Cool, but deploying it is weird. You have to deploy a minimal interpreter. Yes, exactly. You have to use Petite Shea scheme, and you can make standalone binaries with it, but it just seemed like it was more of a headache than necessary. So yeah. Okay, let me scroll back a little bit because I saw some other mentions here. And also, Shea has its own module/library syntax, because Kent Dybvig was coming up with his own proposal for what the R6RS module syntax would be, or library syntax would be, and I think they didn't go with it, so he has his own thing, which is nice. And if you read the papers that he wrote about creating module scopes in Scheme just with syntaxes, then it makes a whole lot of sense. But if you want to have like Scheme code that works across implementations, then it's better to follow the defined library implementation in R7RS. Even there's something in R6RS, I think. Anyway, Case says, clearly the only solution is write our own scheme. And Ashraz says, you mean mesh, Case? Yes, well, that's what I was doing. So at least with mesh, the point is, I wanted the scheme that is easy to embed in the C application, but also to compile to native programs on its own without having to use a C compiler to do that. Mesh is on hiatus at the moment. It was really taking up too much of my time because I was obsessed, like fully obsessed with writing it. Like writing a compiler is the mother of all nerd snipes. And if you are interested in computing at all and you start writing a compiler, it's an endless rabbit hole and it will take over your life. So I will get back to Mesh because I think that there's a lot of potential for it to have kind of a niche position as a really capable personal programming platform, I suppose, for building your own cross-platform tools and things like games, etc. But at least for today, I need to do some other things first, like work on system crafters. Fade says, when Paul Graham was doing Arc, he built it in Racket, which I guess tracks. Yeah, Arc is interesting because it's like, if you read all of Paul Graham's old writings, he was like talking about Arc all the time. But I think Arc has gone through many iterations of what it's supposed to be over time. And I don't know if many people use it. I know that Hacker News uses it, but aside from that. Hello to Daigo, nice to see you. Dave says, holding out for ahead of time native compilation in Guile. It will happen eventually. Yes, there's a lot of really interesting work going on in Guile land right now, especially around WebAssembly compilation and brand new GC implementation by Andy Wingo. Well, I guess both of the things I mentioned is being led by Andy Wingo, of course, because he's the sort of the head honcho on the Guile project. But yeah, Guile struggles with cross-platform. I mean, obviously it works fine on Linux and Mac OS, but Windows, there's issues there. I've seen Dave on Threads in recent months talking about Windows issues. I think Dave was trying to do a game jam and was trying to use Chickadee or one of the game libraries that he made and release a game on Windows, and it wasn't working because of some weird issue in Guile. Dave says, we'll have WASM output before native. Yes, that's for sure. Alejandro says, does your setup use org mode publish? Yes, it does. We've been talking about it. Dave says, yeah, Windows support needs to be dealt with. If Guile worked on Windows, I would be more inclined to use it because I'm okay with Guile as a language with some of the customizations it's made to Scheme. I think Guile is great. It has a lot of really useful stuff inside of it. So I would certainly use it if it was better on the cross-platform front. Russell says, I still don't understand what Scheme is used for that is different than something like Python. Any recommended reading for that? What is a good book for Scheme? Like a practical book. Is there a practical book for Scheme? There's like the Little Schemer, but that's more like getting started understanding the computational model or the programming model of Scheme. Lisp in small pieces. Well, that's definitely like a compiler book. Good book though. Oh yeah, Structure and Interpretation of Computer Programs. Not very practical. It's another book that's more about like algorithms, but Structure and Interpretation of Computer Programs. Good book. Maybe I should just do Common Lisp. No, don't do that. Don't do Common Lisp. I'm not saying Common Lisp is bad. I just think Scheme is so much more aesthetically pleasing and a nice language. And I'm just always going to say Scheme is better, regardless of whether it's objectively true or not. It doesn't matter. Scheme just feels right to me. More than any other language that I've used. I like the way it works. I like the fact that it encourages me to do things my own way. I prefer that. Scheme just seems like the right level of abstraction plus language features that enable you to do the things you need to do. Dave says, Software Design for Flexibility is an advanced book, but it showcases the power of Lambda. I have that, and I want to read that. I just haven't gotten back to it. Fade says, I hate how if you write your program in Guile, it doesn't migrate to any other Scheme implementation. Yes, that is a huge problem in the Scheme community, where even though there is a specification that is very well written and very, well, I would say like mostly clear, there's undefined behavior. There's definitely gaps in the details of implementations. And it also specifically tells you in a few different places that it's up to an implementation to decide how it wants to do something. Even though there's a standard, all of the implementations are written for different purposes, and they have different levels of support for different parts of the language in the specification, and they might do things slightly differently. So even if you write perfectly adherent Scheme code based on R6RS, R7RS, etc., there's no guarantee it's going to work perfectly on other implementations. And like Dave says in the chat, I'm not a standard Scheme person. Pick your fave and stick with it. That's why I started writing Mesh, because I wanted something specific. I wanted to write applications a specific way, and I started making my own Scheme implementation because I wanted to release games and tools cross-platform, even on Android, iOS, with Scheme, and let it do its own compilation effectively. So one day that will exist, but until then, I'll be using Guile Scheme because that's the second best in my opinion. Kay says, how can I read a file? Who knows? Well, use ports. That part's pretty straightforward. All right, let's get back to the publishing stuff. Don't get me started talking about Scheme. I can spend a whole stream just talking about Scheme because how can I make that rhyme again? Because it's clean. Okay. What else am I missing here? Page URLs, ESXML. Oh, another thing that I did. OMG, David, you should do a Scheme stream. Yeah, I've done one of those, maybe two of those. I'll do some more at some point. Thano says, maybe we need a podcast about Scheme. Maybe not a rap song, though. A podcast about Scheme could be cool. I don't know if enough happens in the Scheme world. I guess with all the implementations that exist, there's probably things to talk about, but I don't know if like, major changes are happening all the time. Anyway, removal of OX Slim HTML. There was this package that I used to use for a while called OX Slim HTML. And it produced simpler HTML output for org files, and I liked that. But then something weird happened with the project where the author of OX Slim HTML got the mistaken idea that the org maintainers were going to take his export backend and put it into org mode because he says it here, it's now part of org, but that's not true. It didn't actually get made part of org. I don't know what happened. He suggested that it get taken in to the project and it didn't. So when he thought that it was going to go into org, he archived this repo, which then made Melpa delist this package on Melpa, so you couldn't install it from Melpa anymore. So I had to take the source code for OX Slim HTML, check it into my repo so that I could actually use it. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just maintain this thing myself for a while if I have to. But then when I started remaking the site, I decided that I wanted to use the default HTML generation of org as much as possible. And I think it's improved a lot over time because people like Tech or Tim Cross, who's one of the maintainers of org mode or maybe a major contributor to org mode now. You've probably seen him around. Techosaur. Is that how he says his name? Anyway, I did a .file detective on him a couple years ago. Point being, the HTML output of org mode seems to be good enough now. I took org Slim HTML or OX Slim HTML out of the code because it was just weird and problematic. What else? Redirect pages, that will be interesting. Let's see. RSS feeds, and then Codeberg CI. Okay, we got time for all that. So one thing I wanted to do is make it possible to redirect links that I had been using previously on the older iteration of the System Crafters website, and to the new locations where those pages live, because I wanted to restructure the site a little bit. But the thing is, with a static website, you can't easily set up redirects. You can't just have a piece of live code that executes and then does the redirect for you whenever they go to that page. So what's the solution? Well, apparently there is a solution that you can do with static files in HTML. Now, this is not a perfect solution because I don't know if web crawlers like Google will actually take the redirect info from that page and then update their index to point to the new link. I'm hoping they will. We'll see. I don't really know what's going to happen with that. But I did come up with my own solution for this, which is a function I'm calling generate redirects. And it just takes an A list of the URL path that the page originally was at, and then the new path, and then it will generate an HTML page, which looks like this, where it just has a head tag, meta HTTP equiv refresh, and then just sends you to that new link. It also has a little bit of text inside of the page to say that you're being redirected. So if you were to go to systemcrafters.net/support the channel, for a moment, you will see a blip where it says redirecting, and then it will go to the new page. Yeah, see? So it's like for just a split second, you see redirecting and then it moves to the new page. So that's all done using static files, which is pretty cool. I think it's a good short-term solution. However, Codeberg, being the cool site that it is, pages documentation, they have a new feature coming, which is not yet available, which allows you to set up a file in your repo that actually sets redirects that they will do in the server. So you can do a move permanently redirect, the 301 redirect, which then web crawlers like Google, etc., will pick up on and then update their index. At least they're supposed to. So this is a much better solution. It's just something I can't use yet, but I am prepared to use it whenever the time comes. I spoke to the people who work on that project. Whenever they do their next deployment, which I don't know when it's going to be, maybe soon, that feature will be live, and then you can use these underscore redirects files to set up your redirects so that you can move your links around. So if you have a static website that you want to make sure that maybe if you've posted a link to something somewhere a long time ago, if you want to make sure that link still works for your new version of the website, you can have redirects set up in that way. So pretty useful. But in the meantime, this hacky redirect static page generator is the way to go for now. And that doesn't go through the publishing framework at all. In fact, I have my own DW publish function, which is like the main function that gets executed. That calls DW publish all, and then later does the generate redirects call for just the whatever I have here in this A list. And then now is a good time to talk about RSS. Now, OX RSS is sort of like the standard RSS feed generator for org publish. I think it used to be part of org, but they may have kicked it out and now it's like an external package. It was like org contrib, but now it's like an external package. I tried to use this and it was kind of weird. Like it didn't work the way I expected it to. What it wants is for you to have all of your article information generated into a single org page. So all of the pages on your site that you want to show up in your RSS feed, you need to make a special org file that has all that information in it, structured in a particular way. And then this backend can take that file and turn it into an RSS feed. It would be possible to produce such a file using the sitemap logic. It is possible to do that. You would need probably a separate entry for, like, let's say live streams. I would need a separate entry purely for generating that index page so that OX RSS could read it correctly. So basically you're looping over this list of live streams files twice to do that, which is not so great. But I guess the solution I have now also is effectively doing that, so whatever. But it seemed kind of weird and hacky. Now, the approach that I'm using now also is weird and hacky, but at least it works and it doesn't take as much effort necessarily as making OX RSS do the right thing. So eventually I will try OX RSS again because it would be nice to have a more org-friendly solution than what I'm using now. But until then, the only other option is to write a new RSS export backend, which honestly I think is better. It would be better to do that, in my opinion. Someone should do that. Maybe I'll do it. I don't know. But for now, the solution I'm using is called Web Feeder. And this is a project created by Ambravar, otherwise known as Pierre Neidhart, who is one of the authors of the Nixt web browser. It's written in Common Lisp. So if we go to Ambravar Web Feeder, you can see this page on GitLab. And this is a Emacs package that instead of going through the org publishing system, what it does is it looks at all of your output HTML files in a particular folder, scrapes information out of them, and then generates an RSS or Atom feed based on that. This process is very weird because you have all this metadata in your org files already. So now you're spitting it out to HTML files, and then you're loading it back in by scraping the HTML file output to get the information. The thing is, it works. It takes a little bit of tweaking depending on how you write your HTML files out because it has some specific assumptions of what your page structure is. But that is something that you can deal with. In fact, let's see. Where am I? Okay, I think I might be setting some variables somewhere. RSS. Okay, so I have some custom functions here that do this extraction using the libxml library inside of Emacs. So it's basically an XML parser. And if you set the web feeder title function, date function, and other function variables for that package to your own functions, you can control how that information gets extracted from the file. However, the very weird thing, another weird thing, is that to do this, each of these functions is actually loading the file brand new every time. HTML file is a path. You're using with temp buffer, inserting the file contents of HTML file, and then reading it in with libxml, parsing it, and then writing out the information. So for every part of the page that needs to be read, it is opening the file every time. It's a little bit nutty, but it works. So I'm using it for now. I would prefer a better option that uses the existing metadata, but that's what we have. Fade says org file as data structure. It is like that. Like OXRSS expects that. It might be fine. Anyway, so the configuration I'm using here is I'm telling it where I want the output file. I'm also telling it the root URL for the site, which is a variable that I set. I'll explain that in a second. Then I'm looking at the public folder and enumerating over all the files under the news subpath, and then picking out all the HTML files from inside there. And that is the list of files that goes into WebFeeder that it then opens all those and scrapes the information to get the RSS feed information. And then this builder function says basically to make an RSS feed file out of that. And then you give the additional metadata that's needed for the top level part of the RSS file. So not the best way to do this, but it is flexible enough that I can have different RSS feeds for live streams, videos, etc., just by having new calls to this WebFeeder build if I want to. So it works. That is what it is. The other thing I wanted to mention is something I'm doing for special behavior on CI. So by CI, I mean when the code runs on the repository after I make a commit, there is a special environment variable that gets set pretty commonly for CI systems like Codeberg CI system or GitHub Actions, Travis CI, whatever. There's a CI environment variable that gets set to true. So this org publish all, this second or the first parameter basically is a Boolean that says, should it just like not cache any of the files and just like regenerate all of them? I have it set up so that if there's an environment variable called force or an environment variable called CI, it automatically just rewrites everything. So in fact, let's just try this. I'm gonna run compile. Do I have the command line up here? Let's see. I'm gonna use metax compile, and then I'm going to run this emacsq batch blah, blah, blah. Let's see what it does. It's gonna install all these packages that are needed for generating the site, and then it's eventually gonna go run through all of them and generate them. And while it does that, let me go check on the chat a little bit. Fade says, why is Scheme balkanized when some implementations haven't moved past R5RS? Yeah, some haven't, that's for sure. Fade says, why are R6RS and R7RS controversial in the Scheme world? R6RS was considered to be too heavyweight. A lot of new things got added in, a lot of extra user-friendly features. And then R7RS tried to walk that back by splitting the spec into the small specification, which is more similar to the original R5 and below. And then that's called the R7RS small spec. And then there's the R7RS large spec, which is like the batteries included modules that you could add to your implementation. But I don't know that many implementations have actually done that. I think that those who are doing R7RS just do the small and not all of it. Fade says, Scheme is better than just about any choice but Common Lisp. We can argue about that all day and night. I understand though. I respect your love for Common Lisp. I look to you as a mentor and a guide in anything related to Common Lisp, Fade. Fade says, does org exposes parser programmatically? I don't know. Ashra says, MSys2 has a Guile package, not entirely sure what's missing for Windows support. That build doesn't work, I think. Something's wrong with it. Kay says, R7RS large will never be finished either. Yeah, I think it's not even ratified, is it? Anyway, all right. Let's get through the rest of this. Okay, so actually I did just compile the whole site, right? So that was just using Emacs compile. Now, if I run this again, it's going to remember that I've already exported all those files because it's got a cache file that it looks at. So it just skips all the unmodified files, and it will only regenerate any file that I've changed since then, like the modified timestamp has occurred. But if I were to instead run this with force equals true at the front, then it will go regenerate all those files again from scratch. So it's useful if you make changes to the overall page layout, header and footer, etc., to go regenerate all the pages locally so you can see like the actual changes to all the pages. So that's just one little thing I added there. Same thing for the CI true. I just want to make sure that everything gets generated from scratch. It should, because those files should not exist on CI, but you never know. Also, I do a similar check here for the DW site URL. If we're on CI, I say that the site URL is systemcrafters.net. Otherwise, I use localhost 8080 because I use the httpd serve directory function that comes from, what's that library? Oops. Hey, go away. HTTPD serve directory that comes from simplehttpd.el. It's like a web server that can be run inside of Emacs. Locally, I'm using that to do testing of the page. In fact, we could do that right now. HTTPD serve directory. I'll make it serve the public directory. I'll go to localhost 8080. Let me make sure I put HTTP on the front of that. And then you can see the local version of the website, and I can make any tweaks I want to make there. So Emacs is hosting it for me. So the whole development workflow for the site is done with Emacs, which is pretty cool. Let's see. I think that's about it for all the other things. So the last two things are the deploying to Codeberg pages. You can go look at the documentation for Codeberg pages to have more information about that. I highly recommend it as a static website host because it has all the stuff that you need. It's quite good. And you have a lot of flexibility on how you set up custom domains that point to your project sites, your repo sites. You can set up any number of sites with any number of custom domains, whatever you want. They don't charge you any extra for that. Well, they don't charge you anything. The whole site's free. So the way that you set up domains is described in this file, but the important part is that you need to have a .domains file. And you can see in mine that I actually have a few different domains that are redirecting all to systemcrafters.net. So the old new .systemcrafters.net that I was using temporarily is there. The old systemcrafters.cc domain is there to redirect that to systemcrafters.net. And then a couple entries here for the codeberg.page, which corresponds to the repo name, which is systemcrafters site, and also the branch that the page files are on, pages.systemcrafters site. Documentation explains all this, but it's worth noting that if you are making a static site that you're doing yourself, you need to move this file into the folder that gets published to your pages branch, because otherwise it won't work. So the last thing I'm doing in my publish command is just using copy file to copy this domains file over into the public directory so that happens. That's really nice because you have a lot of control over how your pages get exposed as custom domains. Also, there is a CI platform for Codeberg called Woodpecker, which is based on Drone, if you've ever heard of Drone CI before. And this is all based on Docker containers. So in this pipeline, it's my build web pipeline, I'm using a Docker container image called Emacs, which someone has produced, which has all the latest builds of Emacs in it, or whatever version of Emacs you want. And there's this certain tag called CI, which is made for, like, it adds some extra stuff for CI servers, basically. So I'm just using like a special Docker image that has Emacs installed already. Then I just run my script as part of the command. And then once the public folder gets created, what I do is I go into that folder and I pretend that it's a new Git repository. I use git init. I add all the files to it. I set up my user information. Then I commit all the files as they have been changed to that branch, the pages branch. Where is it? Oh, I haven't done that yet. Yeah, so then I add the repository itself as an upstream using a token that I've stored as a secret on the repository. Then I force push to the pages branch of the repository. So that automates the whole process of taking all those output files and just like slamming them into the repo to have them available to be used as a pages branch. Now, as we saw, I think that causes the size of the repo to build up over time, especially if you have big files like I do. So maybe it's not the best way to do this, but it's the way that I'm doing it right now. If anybody yells at me, I'll change it, but it works. So that's sort of the end-to-end. I highly recommend looking into Woodpecker on Codeberg. I don't know if that's fully released yet, but you can sign up for the beta. Let's see, Codeberg Woodpecker beta. So I don't know if it's here. Anyway, there's information on how to sign up for that somewhere, but it's super useful. I like it a lot, and I'm using Codeberg and Codeberg CI for all my stuff right now. So super highly recommended for that and for Codeberg's pages for static websites. That's sort of the end-to-end for everything that I'm doing on the new site. More stuff, excuse me. More stuff will be happening over time. I'll be adding other new functionality to the site. I kind of wanted to do some hacking, but I talked way too long, so obviously we're not going to do that today because the stream is effectively over. But maybe on another stream we can do some of this. Hopefully that was a good insight into how you can sort of take org publish to its logical extreme and do a lot of deep customization to it. I feel like it's a pretty viable option. The only way that it wouldn't be a good choice for your site is if you need some more dynamic behavior, or if you have so many org files that it just takes forever to regenerate the entire site. But I think it would take a lot of org files for it to take like minutes to generate the site. So probably you can get pretty far with this, and I intend to. I'm just gonna stick with this for a while. The only other thing I would consider using is Dave Thompson's Haunt for Guile Scheme. The reason why I don't use that is because it doesn't support org files out of the box. However, Haunt is great. I actually experimented with it a bit over Christmas, and I really like it. It's just that I need org files. So, all right, let me see what else has happened in the chat here. I saw some stuff about Naughty Dog. Alejandro says, do you have different configurations for different subdomains? You can do that depending on how you set up your scripts. It is possible to do that. Dave says, JIT and threads are two very broken things that I've tried building Guile for on Windows. Yes, those are the things I've heard about. Pie the Sailor says, I think Naughty Dog's Goal language was written with Arc Racket. I don't know about specifically what it was used for. Yeah, Fade says Goal was written with, excuse me, it was written with Allegro Common Lisp. That sounds right. The later Naughty Dog stuff was written using Racket, Dave says, I think. Where was that? The chat jumped. Back when it was called PLT Scheme, PS3 era. Okay. Ashra says, what's strange is that the size increases that much since most of your static content shouldn't change at all and still have the same SHA. Well, what I'm doing is force pushing new commits, which have a new SHA. And I think it treats all the files as new. I might be wrong about that, but my assumption is that every time I force push in CI, it's making a new commit hash with all new file data, and it's duplicating everything. Dave says, using org outside of Emacs is tough. I think that you could definitely shell out to org to get the body of the HTML. Haunt could have an extension that could have a shim Emacs Lisp script that gets loaded into Emacs to configure the minimal body content export for an org file, and then use that as the content for an actual Haunt page. I'm pretty sure that would work. I just haven't tried it yet. I do want to, though. Yeah, Dave, I think that's the way to do it. You just shell out to Emacs batch mode and just get only the body, which you can easily do with the org publish setup. And that should work. But aside from that, Haunt is super cool, and also it's great if you use Geeks, because then you can use Geeks to set up the publishing of your website. You should check out Dave Thompson's own website. Let's see, what is it? get.dthompson.us. I'm sorry, Dave. I'm showing how much I know about you and your projects while doing this. It might be creepy, but just because you put yourself out there as a key player in the Guile Scheme community, and people are going to know what kind of stuff you're doing. So where is it? blog.git. Go to Dave's blog if you want to see an example of a really cool implementation of a Haunt site, because there's a lot of stuff in here. I was looking at it for examples whenever I was trying to learn how to use Haunt for my own page. A lot of cool stuff in here. Definitely worth looking at. Also, Christine Limmer-Weber uses it for her websites. So any of her sites, I think, are a good example for Haunt web pages. And as we heard before, Akites is using Haunt, I think, for his stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff to look at for that. Yeah, Dave's done a lot of other cool things like Shroud. Shroud is a really cool idea for a project, which is basically like a pass-like password manager, but it uses S expressions for the files that it stores. I would use it if I wasn't using pass already. What we need is a Shroud app that works on Android that does the same thing, so that one could use Shroud passwords on Android, and then I would definitely use it. Ashra says, I have to ban you for doxing Dave. Yeah, you should ban me. I wonder what would happen if you banned me on my own stream. Would it just go off? DSyncR says, isn't there a way to avoid regenerating org files? Yes, there is, but on a CI workflow where you're trying to generate the latest version of the site, it's risky to not just regenerate everything from scratch, because you will end up with files that are out of sync, for sure. Kay says, but what if I don't use Geeks? Well, you could use Haunt without Geeks for sure, but what I found is that it can be kind of painful to work on Guile projects that use third-party libraries if you don't use Geeks, because Geeks does such a good job of putting everything together that I think there's another package manager called like Guildhall or something for Guile, but I've never used it. I don't really know what the status is on that, but Geeks is definitely the way to go for that. Dave says, Shroud was neat, but it didn't work for me either. Yeah. Yeah, I want to get Pass set up on my phone so I can use that instead of 1Password, but I just haven't done it yet. Thanks, Dave. Guile is all auto tools / Geeks. Yeah, that's one thing that annoys me a little bit about Guile projects, is that non-trivial Guile projects are always using auto tools, and auto tools is blah. I don't know. I'm not a major fan of auto tools. It does a lot of cool stuff. It's useful stuff, but if you look at a lot of Guile projects and it has all the auto tool stuff in it, it's not cool, man. That's another reason why I wanted to make Mesh, is to make things a lot simpler. But obviously, you don't have to rewrite an entire scheme implementation to make things simpler. Kay says, this is why I use Chicken. Well, yeah, I'm sure that does work. Dave says, AutoTools is the worst, but nothing is better. There's some stuff. That's another new quote for the history of the channel. There's ways to do things without AutoTools, right? There's some other, like even in Geeks, there's like a Guile build system that doesn't require AutoTools, but I think if you want to do things like embedding the version number into files and stuff, or into the project, that they use AutoTools for that. I don't know. Yeah, Case, try Gambit and let me know what you think. It's cool, but it also is a little bit weird. A little bit rough around the edges. All right, anyway. So that was it. That was the workflow for publishing the new website using org publish. Hopefully you learned something from that. I thought it was a pretty fun project, and I'm pretty optimistic about it. Unless Dave makes Haunt work with org, then I'll reconsider it. But yeah, it's been cool. It worked better than I thought. Org publish is a little bit impenetrable at first because you don't really know what customization capabilities you have until you start really digging into the help for all the functions and variables involved, and then you start to figure out what is available to you. So I probably should do some more videos to explain that, because you can't really figure it out otherwise. All right, Dave's making evil plans. That sounds good to me. Thank you all so much for being here today. Really appreciate it. Definitely give the new website a look if you haven't yet. And please sign up for the System Crafters newsletter. That is at systemcrafters.net/newsletter. Every Thursday, I'm going to send out a new update on that. Should be pretty cool, pretty fun. Let me know what you think about it. And until next time, thanks so much for being here and happy hacking. Have a great weekend. See ya.